The world continues to react to the new COVID-19 variant, Omicron. Nigeria has expressed solidarity with South Africa as it struggled with some of the difficulties posed by the new COVID-19 variant, Omicron, discovered in the country. The Nigerian government warned Western countries against discriminations against South Africa following travel restrictions imposed in South African countries in the aftermath of the new virus discovery. Ahead of a media briefing scheduled for today in Abuja on the visitation of the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, Minister of Health Dr. Sagia Hanire stated that Nigeria's position in a chat yesterday that the federal government will go ahead to receive the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, who had been scheduled to visit Nigeria from today with other top officials from his administration on a 3-day visit. Your take on this, Tundu?
Well, it's all very well and good for the Nigerian government to be expressing solidarity with South Africa, but I think the loyalty of our government lies with our people first and foremost. I do have my concerns that that planned visit is going ahead as normal. The federal government has announced the precautions that they will be taking. They have to have their negative COVID test. They have to be fully vaccinated before arrival in Abuja. And on day 2, they're going to do a PCR test. Why? It would have been safer for me, personally, to postpone this trip. Failing that, have them isolate, even if they are fully vaccinated, because the jury is not in on Omicron and its effect on the current vaccines that are available. The WHO is still in the process of doing its research, and we'll be finding out whether or not it's resistant to certain vaccinations. So this whole let's show solidarity right now for me is quite misplaced. The last thing we need is having Omicron run rampant in Nigeria. I mean, we've been so lucky with all the previous strains so far. And I say lucky in the looser sense of the word possible, because a lot of people that will never be replaced, that will forever be mourned, have been lost to this virus. I don't want to see the numbers escalate sky high as a result of trying to be chums with South Africa. I just don't think it's worth it. At the very least, they should have been placed on full isolation. Now, that point about the knee-jerk reaction from the Western governments banning flights from South Africa, I actually think is quite a reasonable point when you think about how that was not done with China, which is actually which put the whole world into this problem. Chinese travel was not impeded at all. Perhaps it can be argued that the lesson has been learned from that, or perhaps, and I tend to lean more on the side of that there's some prejudice here, as we all too often see. The whole story of COVID-19 has been, yes, to do with science. I remember we had this expert on this show once, and I made some reference to the fact that people seem to be somewhat disappointed that it did not originate in Africa and that it is not killing us like flies. And it went right over the expert's head, because that expert is thinking purely as a scientist, as a scientific person. But the rest of the world does not exist in that rarefied field of science. There is a lot of prejudice that comes to play when governments are deciding on policies, and we've seen that. Look at how the UK had double standards about the AstraZeneca vaccine that came from particular countries. That was a problem. So I don't want to dismiss that here either. But I do wish our government had been that much more careful and mindful of us citizens rather than their august visitors.
Okay, there are many strands to this. President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa is making his first major state visit to Nigeria. There are categories of visits by a visiting head of state. You could have a state visit, which is the highest category. You can have an official visit, which is next. You can also have a working visit. So Cyril Ramaphosa, since becoming president of South Africa, is making his first state visit to Nigeria, which is the highest level of demonstration of good relations between two sovereign states. And a state visit is the visit by a sovereign head to another sovereign head. I imagine that this will have been in the calendar for a very long time. And so Nigeria will have found itself in a very difficult situation, trying to tamper with that because of the announcement on November 25 of the discovery of the Omicron variant in southern Africa. And again, within the context of the fact that the South Africans themselves have protested that South Africa is being demonized whereas what they have done is to be proactive, be transparent in informing the world immediately through genome sequencing and the efforts of Dr. Eliezer Coetzee, that they discovered that there's this variant of concern and they informed the world. So there is the politics side of it. And at the heart of international law and diplomacy among African states is this principle called African brotherhood, where some people criticize it. They say, well, it's not a good idea because oftentimes within the African Charter, African countries tend to bond together when any of their countries, any of their member states is under pressure. They operate a principle of one for all for one, although we have had instances in the past when this was an issue. So within this visit, within the context of the declaration of the Omicron variant, we find Nigeria, again, following that idea of African brotherhood and standing by South Africa and saying that South Africa should not be demonized, that what you are dealing with is not an African variant of the COVID-19 virus, that what we're dealing with is a variant of concern for the whole of humanity. And it is instructive that within this context, the United States, speaking through U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, had cause over the weekend to call Naledi Pandor. Naledi Pandor is the Minister in charge of International Affairs and Cooperation for South Africa, to commend South Africa specifically. So I know that some virologists, our virologists, led by Professor Yewale Tomori, have said, look, the visiting delegation, Nigeria should take certain steps and all that. But I think what is on the table is that on the second day, that delegation will take the PCR test. And also, don't forget that Indonesia, that is hosting the G20 summit in Jakarta, had also said, look, certain countries from Africa, including Nigeria, their passengers will not be allowed to come, and if they arrive in Indonesia, they will be quarantined for 14 days. But they made an exception for the G20 delegation that is going to Jakarta for the G20 summit. That is that about that. Now, on the issue of the visit of President Ramaphosa, I think it's a very important visit. Nigeria has developed stronger bilateral relations with South Africa since 1999, when the South African Binational Commission was established. And under that auspices, we've had relations with South Africa in terms of trade and investment, even if the weight of it is on the side of South Africa. Over 200 South African investments in Nigeria alone. But Nigerian investors do not have that kind of privilege in South Africa. And that's why we've had issues with South Africa with regard to xenophobia, with regard also this competition between the two countries in terms of which country is more powerful than the other. And that drama has been played out in terms of the appointments to international organizations and also appointments of the African Union Commission chairman. So the visit by President Ramaphosa at this time, I think, provides Nigeria an opportunity to see how we can deepen trade relations with South Africa, how we can look at some of those contentious issues in terms of our relationships, particularly in the area of security, defense cooperation, and also trade and investment, to ensure that Nigerian businessmen operating under the auspices of a body called the South African Nigeria Chamber of Commerce also are able to leverage on opportunities between those two countries. I think the Nigerian government has acted properly in this regard in terms of diplomacy, and I do not think that the visit of the South African delegation translates into an importation of Omicron into Nigeria. I'm sure that the guys at the Foreign Affairs Ministry will take the necessary precautions. I think we should focus more on the importance of that visit and how Nigeria can leverage on it.
All right, that's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rotu Sudiri, Michael Wilson, Adeso Amoro, and Aaron Akirila to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adeso Amoro is here with us. Adeso, great to have you. Good morning.
Good morning, Rufai. Great to be here. Good morning, Tundu, and good morning, Dr. Abati.
Good morning. I love your hair.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Well, let's look at the latest COVID-19 pandemic data. Until Thursday, we would not have a full picture of what the movement has been in the last week. There's the fear about Omicron and what it is doing at the moment, but the Johns Hopkins University is providing these figures as they stand from countries and territories as at now. You should have that on your screen. Over 7.5 billion doses of coronavirus vaccines have been administered, over 261 infections, and at least 5.1 million deaths recorded so far. Yes, it is the news no one wanted to hear, the discovery of a new coronavirus variant, now dubbed Omicron, and also designated a coronavirus variant of concern by the WHO. Well, this is sending chills through much of the world as cases have now been identified in more than 10 countries and counting. It's beginning to look like no good deed goes unpunished, but the South African president, as you've mentioned earlier in the show, has now asked or is demanding in strong terms, naming those countries one after the other who have placed bans on South African countries or Southern African countries, asking them to reverse the travel bans imposed. He describes it as unjustified and discriminatory. The president, who is expected in Nigeria today with his entourage, also says infections have increased dramatically since the variant was first identified. He says from 2% to 9% infection rate in less than a week. There's a lot of questions around Omicron, and I know you do have Professor Wole Tomori to come talk about the science of this variant, but those questions will keep coming. We keep our fingers crossed and watch to see what the science has to say. You've also spoken about the Nigerian government's response. Well, we expect a national briefing sometime today from the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19 and the Nigerian health authorities in general. Meanwhile, let me tell you, this might be some sort of good news, and you wonder why the world has gone into a frenzy. The doctor, a South African doctor who raised the alarm about Omicron, says her patients who have been diagnosed with the variant have shown mild symptoms. Her name is Dr. Angelique Kotsu, and she says although the cases are peculiar, so far they have been mild. She has also described the global reaction as extremely premature. Now, global alert, more countries are restricting travels in response to this new powerful variant. Powerful because it has more than 30 mutations never been seen since the pandemic. The latest to announce those travel bans this morning include Japan and Israel, who have joined Morocco in halting all, and I mean all, incoming travel to their country. We had previously seen countries imposing ban on just Southern African countries, but these three countries, Japan, Israel, and Morocco, at the moment, the situation is fluid. At the moment, say they don't want to see anybody at all in their country. I guess they joined the likes of China, who has refused to open for the past 2 years. Now, at the moment, Philippines is the only country that has added 7 European countries to its red list, in addition to the Southern African countries where these variants were first identified and the region. The U.S. is expected to slam full travel ban on all Southern African countries today. We expect to see that. We keep our fingers crossed and bring you details. Indonesia, however, Dr. Abati mentioned, over the weekend became the first country to add Nigeria to its travel ban list following the fears of Omicron. It is not clear why. Again, we'll wait to hear response of the Nigerian government to some of these questions. And of course, the U.S. has praised South Africa. Dr. Abati also mentioned this. You've done the heavy lifting for me this morning. But it would seem as if the horse has bolted, guys. It's no longer where it has been confirmed. It's actually where have we not detected this virus yet.
And then there's news that 2 people returning to Canada from Nigeria, were tested positive with that particular variant. So it appears that Indonesia did sort of jump the gun on banning Nigeria. I didn't really understand the logic of that because Nigeria is in West Africa, not Southern Africa. But like we were talking about earlier this morning, these travel bans and these measures that are being imposed bear scant relation to logic. A lot of it is knee-jerk prejudice and hysteria. And yes, like you said, no good deed goes unpunished. It's all very well for the US to commend South Africa for showing more transparency than, frankly, China ever did. But they are still about to proceed to ban them if news reports are to be believed. So that little pat on the back really means nothing. But I do worry, and I must stress what I said earlier. Day 2 PCR tests for me, for the South African delegation, do not go far enough. Over the summer, a lot of people, if you traveled to the UK, you had to do a Day 2 PCR test, but you were not prancing around town. You were in isolation. You leave isolation, go straight to do your test and return, and then when you get the all clear, you can now circulate. I do worry that it can spread because we have established that COVID-19 and all its variants do not care about status, position, gender, nothing. So I don't see why exceptions are being made for people because they're part of a high-powered delegation. We're still in danger allowing people who have not been in isolation to just be traipsing around Abuja. That's just my take on it.
I think what can be established effectively, it seems to me, is that we now live in the COVID-19 world. The emergence of the Omicron variant is a major setback for the war against the pandemic. It means that there is a lot more that is yet unknown and that there is a lot more that scientists need to do. And then, of course, all the projections about economic recovery have been turned more or less adrift. On Friday, markets slumped heavily. The oil market lost up to about $10 per barrel. This morning, the market is on a rebound, but even then, there's a lot of uncertainty, making analysts and economists very humble about projections, about economic recovery and interest rates in the year 2022. And then, of course, we all face what may well end up as a bleak Christmas. But what we're told, which may be reassuring, is that scientists are racing against time to reach definite conclusions about this new variant. What they have been able to establish is vaccine escape, a situation whereby you have a new variant that may be able to bypass immune response and not respond adequately to existing vaccines. But that, of course, is, a bit mediated by the disclosure by Angelique Coetzee. Angelique Coetzee was the first, medical doctor in South Africa to talk about an emerging variant that was not of the same nature as the Delta variant. And she did that on November 18. She's chair of the South African Medical Association. And she described the symptoms as extreme fatigue, scratchy throat, dry cough, and, she reported that. By November 25, scientists in South Africa had identified B112.529 as, a new variant, and then all of those developments. I think the countries that appear to be panicking, a lot of fear, a lot of panic, a lot of uncertainty, I think they're just trying to be careful. You will recall that the other time, 20 months ago, when we were faced with a similar situation, the major criticism was about countries that did not respond early enough, and how the failure of leadership complicated the situation. So you find from Indonesia to Germany to Japan to Hong Kong, you find governments trying to toe the careful line. And what demonstrates this, majorly for me, will be the response in the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom now is trying to mobilize more jabs. Before now, only persons above 40, vulnerable persons, health workers, were to take the 4 jabs. But Sajid Javid is now talking about a situation whereby in a matter of weeks, they will roll out, more booster jabs, even for persons 18 and above. So governments have a responsibility to take precaution. But the big takeaway for me at the end of the day is the fact that we're being told that people just must return to the original mandate. Wear your mask, take the necessary precautions, and just be careful, because what we're faced with is a great unknown.
I have a lot to say about this, but it's sad we don't have time. But let me see how quick I can stab at this in 30 seconds. One thing is certain, we'll have more mutations. It's a virus. The second most certain thing is will have more mutations. And the second most certain thing is we have mRNA virus vaccines that Moderna is working on. Moderna is saying 3 months' time, they should be able to have something for Omicron. Most importantly, in all of this conversation, we are not talking about the things that give the virus time to mutate. We're not talking about the vaccine inequity. We're not talking about the fact that a country like Botswana was buying Moderna vaccine for $29. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about the lack of solidarity worldwide.
Still did not get it.
You get, and they didn't still get it. I don't have enough time, but we need to go this morning. Thank you.
We'll take a short break now. Thank you very much, Deswa. We'll take a short break now.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rotas Adiri is here to give us African business update. Good morning, Rotas.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. I have to kick off with that interview you just had with Professor Oyewale. And particularly the question, I think it was Rufai or Tundu that asked him about what to do about December, and his very, very honest assessment as to, people avoiding travel here. 8 days ago, the Lagos State government cancelled the Greater Lagos Festival for 2021 because of fears of a fourth wave. That was 8 days ago, before this new issues with this Omicron variant. So even before Omicron, the issue with cooking gas prices rising. So by the time you now add this variant now and the fears over travel, you could have a subdued December, which the fourth quarter economic activity depends on. I mean, the artist Thames is supposed to be performing in Nigeria for the first time since 2019. So if you put all these conditions together between inflation and this new variant, you might see a very subdued December festivities, and we'll have to see what impact that has on economic growth for the fourth quarter, which is usually a good quarter for Nigeria. We move to the Central Bank of Nigeria. At the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria annual dinner, Godwin Emefiele announced that the International Financial Center, which he first announced back in September, which is supposed to be a hub for capital, a gateway for capital built on technology and payment infrastructure, says it will launch at the Eco Atlantic hub in Victoria Island in second quarter of 2022. And he says, of course, as he said before, that it is important that that hub is established because of the fact that there's about $100 trillion worth of capital floating around the world. And that capital needs to have to be attracted into nations like Nigeria. So once again, we will hopefully be seeing that hub set up and ready to go and launch, which will be competing with London's and the Asian tigers of the world as far as competition for capital is concerned in the second quarter of 2022. Still on Eco Atlantic, the Africa Data Center launched their $100 million facility at Eco Atlantic on Friday. This data center, if you think about the importance of data centers, you have to forgive the weather here. If you think about the importance of data centers as buildings that are supposed to house in cloud technology for businesses that are growing hubs in city centers, having a facility here in Nigeria that is going to be, provide a hub for data for a number of businesses is really, really important. So that's from Africa Data Centers, which is part of a portfolio of companies held by Econet, the Econet Group, which is a Pan-African telecommunications giant that has Liquid Technologies and also the Africa Data Center. Also, Kimberly Clark in Kenya is going to be launching a $45 million Huggies manufacturing hub in Kenya to produce diapers. This is, I believe, the second announcement that has been made from another company introducing a diaper manufacturing in the East African giant of Kenya. A Chinese company did so, I think, back in 2019. About 1 million babies are born every year in Kenya, about 8 million babies across Eastern Africa. They are using contract manufacturing, where they are going with an established company that is already established in Kenya. It's going to be in Thika and Thika is about, I believe, 42 kilometers northwest of Nairobi, and that's where that's going to be set up. And then finally, Tanzania is following in the footsteps of Nigeria. The Tanzanian Central Bank the Bank of Tanzania is eyeing a central bank digital currency in order to tap into the advantages that brings as far as financial inclusion is concerned.
All right, Roto, so let me link the story of Kenya and Thika and the finance center they're going to be building at Eco Atlantic, because that's just the way Thika is. I mean, Thika was set up, very good high-speed road, been to Thika a couple of times in Kenya, just straight out of Nairobi, and it's become a new hub for business, for real estate. There's the Thika Golf Resorts and things like that, and factory and industry too is also getting to that area. So it's like an appendage to Nairobi, but it's also gathering that great investment. So you can see how viable, little cities are, just like the city in London, and that's what is happening, as regards what is happening on Eco Atlantic, building an international finance center there that can attract a lot of capital swashing all around the world. And the exciting thing about manufacturing is that it's got great potential. So I'll tell you a little bit about Kenya. In the 70s, the highest employer of labor in Kenya used to be the Bata Shoe Factory. Those that made the Bata Cortina shoes. They were the highest employer of labor in Kenya all of those years. And with all of this, they're going to provide more jobs, for the Kenyan population. And it comes back to us in Nigeria. We should also look at how we can bring foreign investors in. They can provide more jobs. It could be lower the line jobs. You just got your brolly there, that's good. It could be lower the line jobs, but at least those jobs can help move and shore up the economic potential of these countries. And I'm happy about the data center, $100 million worth of investment. That's going to bring a lot of technological brains too in, managing the data center, electricity and other things like that. And that's why we must create infrastructure to be able to manage the immense possibilities we have, because infrastructure is needed, because data center takes gigawatts and gigawatts of electricity. You have to put in that infrastructure in there. And that's why we should look at the possibilities we can open up with those areas.
Well, very quickly, the CBN governor, again, in his forward-looking thrust, as CBN governor of Nigeria, is trying to create a key investment hub with the international financial center that is proposing at the Atlantic City in Lagos. Well, on paper, it looks very attractive, and I hope that this will not end up as just dinner talk, okay? Because when dinner is well served and the food is good, all kinds of promises can be made. But in terms of the objective, selling Nigeria as a high-yielding investment destination for investment capital, that in itself, nobody can quarrel with it. But the taste of the pudding, as they say, is in the eating. We hope that the CBN and the Nigerian government will be able to follow this through and see it through based on all promises related that the Nigerian government had made even before now with regard to e-Naira, with some of the other measures that have been taken proactively by the Central Bank of Nigeria. And then, of course, as for Tanzania, if you look at Tanzania, the story in Tanzania is very similar to that of Nigeria. Tanzania's central bank also trying to go the way of digital currency. 81 other countries are also moving in that direction. But what I find curious in the Tanzanian story is that whereas the Tanzania central bank governor is a bit uncomfortable with cryptocurrencies. Just about 2 weeks earlier, the President Samia Suluhu, had been promoting cryptocurrencies and urging the Tanzania central bank to look in that direction as, an emerging development of interest. But the CBN seems to take a slightly different position. With Tanzania, talking about digital currency now, Tanzania will probably become the second country after Nigeria to go in that direction in terms of the future of money and financial transactions in Africa.
Right, I was going to use, you said my point about Tanzania and the contrast between the president's sort of enthusiasm for cryptocurrency and a lot more restrained tone, or even vaguely hostile note that was struck by their CBN governor. That was interesting. What's your take on that? Because I doubt that could ever happen here in Nigeria. Can you begin to imagine?
Yeah, I doubt as well. I mean, his stance is that he needs to protect the financial ecosystem here because of the scams that we've heard about. So I really doubt that there's going to be any U-turn in that regard.
But just quick clarification, there's a difference between cryptocurrency and e-currencies of those countries, because
well, of course,
the e-currency is waged against the national currency of, like in the case in Nigeria, and the cryptocurrency is waged against, a very, very big web of speculators all over the world, which a lot of people argue with, that has basis in nothing in the first place, and that's why there has a lot of volatility in the market. So there could be a position on, e-currency in Tanzania, and the chairman of Central Bank can be iffy about cryptocurrency.
Well, I think the issue that it throws up is simply about the independence of central banks. That's where I was going. For political figures not to dictate to governors of central bank what they should do with monetary policy. And I hope that's not the direction in which Tanzania may be going. I don't think President Samia Suluhu will probably go in that direction. Maybe not. Maybe not.
Thank you so much, Reuters. We'll take a short break now. Please stay with us for plenty more. Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. Moving on to more business updates, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. Asia Pacific stocks doing what you'd expect, really, after all that panic on Friday about the Omicron COVID variant. Oil prices rebounded very, very slightly as well. But basically, you're looking at shares, looking around to try to find out what's going on, particularly in Hong Kong, for example. Nothing to do with COVID. This one sank more than 23% after the South China Morning Post said that the controlling shareholder was amongst the group arrested for alleged gambling offences. Shares of Sun City therefore down, Japan down as well. They're really looking at, never mind how individual countries right around the world are going to tackle this. I think really people are now looking, for example, at China and wondering whether it's actually going to, as the Americans put it, double down on its zero COVID approach. It might well do, and that would actually obviously harm their economy. Well, I mean, intermittent lockdowns, not too bad. But if we're talking about, people who are in contact with each other, we're being flagged at close contact with people, that really will crimp everything. So therefore, US, the recap there really is about stock futures are slightly higher after Friday's limited sell-off. It actually went down a huge amount in that very, very short period of trading time. Futures on the Dow up about 240 points as we actually speak. The pandemic and the COVID variants remain one of the biggest risks to the markets, and people are now probably saying this may well last round about a year. In the United States, Elon Musk has urged his Tesla employees to reduce the cost of vehicle deliveries, not really wanting to bump up the figures by delivering right at the last moment, because lots of people have been waiting a long time for their Tesla cars, and delivery delays of months, and they've had to been out of pocket getting rental cars and taxis and so on. As far as the UK is concerned, more than 70 million people here have been using their buy now, pay later services. 17 million UK customers have now used these kind of things. In other words, these companies, and you've got to watch them very, very closely indeed. They do let you pay, they do let you buy, but then you have to repay them. And of course, it's a lot of questions about consumer rights amidst all that as well. Another knock-on from COVID, the most recent one, is that British Airways is suspending its flights to Hong Kong amid worries about quarantining and so on. South China Morning Post again reported that one BA worker, I mean, these days it just takes one person really to load the dice and make everybody panic about this. Oil is slightly up after big losses on Friday, up about 4% actually this morning. Gold should have been a safe haven, but the theory about that is that the people sort of went to it and then thought, you know what, we've liquidated a lot of equities, we're going to need some more liquidity, so they've sold gold. So COVID apart, it's still quite an important business week. The big number, of course, the non-farm payrolls at the end of the week in the United States, expecting another 500,000 jobs to be added to the equation. EU, but most particularly PMIs from China, privately, official ones tomorrow, and private industry surveys on Wednesday. So basically, this is all about investors actually wondering, trying to understand what actually comes next. And nobody, of course, really knows. That's the global view this morning.
Right. Michael, real quickly, when is the Bank of England going to take a decision on interest rates? Because we're tired already. Over the weekend, one of the chief economist of the Bank of England was also talking about interest rates and saying, yeah, if he gets the chance, he'll probably vote in favor of interest rates. And secondly, the question is, most of the companies that had IPOs this year, that the IPOs were over $1 billion, they've lost like half of their share prices. Companies like Deliveroo and the likes. What happened to those companies? Was it COVID? Or they were not just what they're sold?
No, I think as far as the IPOs are concerned, I mean, that article went on to pose some interesting questions about that. I just think they're generally overvalued. I think what it is it's why SPACs were. Do you remember we were talking about that only 6 months ago? We don't hear of SPACs anymore. I think we're just one in London so far. I think that there's a lot of money at stake here. A lot of people are looking at these new ideas, and actually, but they're going for the IPOs and they're going to invest in the initial prices. I've spoken to many asset managers about this, and the majority of them say we don't bother with them. You know, we wait to see what actually happens to the companies themselves. And you quoted Deliveroo, quite right too, as well. Exactly, high-priced IPO. In reality, nothing at all. I think as far as the Bank of England's concerned, I think a lot of central banks will be thinking this as they go to work this morning. Yeah, we sort of got our ideas together about when we might raise interest rates, but then this new COVID variant, I mean, nobody knows. South Africa this morning is saying that they think it's relatively mild. Well, it didn't hit the panic on Friday and Thursday and Friday in any kind of mild sense whatsoever. So I think that's another thing being thrown in. Nobody wants to raise interest rates, whatever they fear about inflation, if they feel as though it's going to stymie countries' growth. And I think that's probably where we are this morning. Things could change during the week, but I'm certain we'll get a decision about raising interest rates at the next Bank of England meeting, which is the first full week, which is next week.
Well, isn't what happens to interest rates eventually, either in the US or elsewhere, tied to this new uncertainty that has been imposed by Omicron, about which very little is known? The currencies have tried to recover slightly this morning, from the Australian dollar to the Japanese yen to the Mexican peso. But what are the possibilities? Because it looks like if the Omicron variant goes one way or the other, it's likely to affect economic rebound, economic recovery, and may perhaps result in economies having to eat the humble pie, a bigger pie than they probably would have imagined.
Searching for some kind of answers, I think, too soon. I concluded my report by saying investors are striving to understand what comes next. I think that's where we stand at the moment. I wouldn't like to place any bets or make any predictions about where things are going right now. It could be that this variant actually doesn't do anything at all. It's relatively mild. I was watching the news. I don't know what it's like in your country, but certainly in the UK, there was a big news conference on Saturday, Saturday early evening, where the Prime Minister and the various people who know about the epidemiologists and the government scientists and the rest of them all got together, and they said they clearly have no idea what was going on. What they're not going to do is not close borders. I feel as though people are now onto that. You know, they're saying we're not going to wait anymore. We're not going to go for this herd immunity argument. Do you remember that one that we had all those months ago? We're just going to close borders. We're going to stop flights. We're going to hunker down, and we're going to not. And people have got to self-isolate, not necessarily in expensive hotels, but arrivals to this country have to find somewhere to go, and then after they've been here for 2 days, then they take a PCR test, and so we go on. I think it's too early to be drawing conclusions about what's going on at the moment. moment. I tentatively think that interest rate rises might be held off as a result of this, but it could be that at the end of this week things move very, very fast, and maybe there's a big program out for 2 injections and also another booster as well, which would help, the economies. It's too early to say at the moment, I'm afraid.
Well, the possibilities are open, as Goldman Sachs analysts are trying to argue. But I was also going to talk about Boeing 737 MAX. Over 180 cases of faults, of problems reported since Boeing 737 MAX returned to work with the FAA in the United States and Transport Canada. Don't you think that there should be a second look at the technology, the autopilot mechanism for that 737 MAX before we have another accident on our hands? And then observers say, well, there have been up to more than 180 reports about the malfunctioning of the 737 MAX after it was cleared to return to service.
Yeah, I agree with you. Unfortunately, it's been through those sort of tests already, and the FAA is going to look fairly stupid in the United States if it suddenly says, oh, yes, wait a minute, there's 180 faults we haven't investigated. So you're up against a system which has effectively cleared it, and Boeing are saying the same thing. Boeing are saying, look, it was cleared, and we did everything we were supposed to do by the FAA. I mean, it may be that passengers actually say, oh, well, we're not going to fly on it. I mean, it could be that. You get to your departure gate, you see that it's a Boeing 737 MAX, and you say, do you know what? I'm not going to fly on that. Thank you very much indeed. I suspect there will be a big bit more reputational damage to be hitting Boeing this coming week.
Well, thank you very much, Michael Wilson, for joining us again this morning.